This is the plaintiff, Beth Hurwitz. She says she rented a house from the defendants, and when she went to bed the first night she heard scratching and digging above her head. Turns out the attic was filled with raccoons, a mama and all her babies. They couldn't fix the problem. She got fed up and moved out. Now wants the $3,393.75 she's owed for rent and animal trapper costs. These are the defendants, Jack Kanak and Jennifer Roth. Jennifer says they were handling the raccoon issue, but the plaintiff kept interfering with the trapper and his methods of catching the little babies. They don't owe this woman any money and feel the judge will see things their way when all the evidence is presented to her. They're accused of creating critter chaos.
All parties, please raise your right hand. People's Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Marilyn Milian presiding. Litigants have been sworn, Your Honor.
Thank you, Douglas.
You're welcome.
Okay, Ms. Hurwitz, you are suing your former landlords for $3,393.75 because you want your rent, 50% of your rent to be returned to you that you had paid for months where you had a little bit of a raccoon in the attic problem. Tell me about what happened.
Yes, on January 25th, I wrote to the property manager. I didn't get a response, and so on February 2nd, I wrote again. All in all, Judge, I wrote 32 times about this issue. They hired a trapper in early February who took their check, immediately became sick with COVID. I did not see him again until mid-February, and he was derelict in everything that he did.
How so?
Well, he used a form of musk that should have been completely covering the area of the nesting up in the attic. And instead of going up into the attic, which he didn't do until March 16th, this began January 25th, mind you, he used little Q-tips with the musk down on the ground. So he was not effective at all. He was setting traps outside of the house on the ground and never truly assisted with the issue. And he was belligerent aside from that.
How was he belligerent?
He was a bully. He was
I need facts as opposed to opinion. Tell me what he said or did that made you feel that he was belligerent.
He said right here, "You don't catch nursing mothers, been doing this 22 years, never happens."
Okay, that doesn't sound that belligerent of an answer, but okay, your general feel was that he was disdainful and wasn't respectful or whatever else. I'm more concerned over the fact that it's March something and your first complaint, according to you, was on January 25th. That I am more concerned about. So how is it that when would you hear the activity was it in the attic?
Yes, it was right above my bedroom.
Right. And
yes.
How often would you hear the activity?
Throughout the evening.
So what was it like? Was it scratches? Was it scurrying?
Yes.
I know. You know how I know? Because I've had raccoons in my house in North Carolina, in my attic, and I know what the scurrying and the I know exactly what it sounds like. So I know how unnerving it is. Did you speak with the defendants and bring it to their attention, or were you working through a property manager, or what?
Thank you. I was doing both because the property manager was defunct in their obligation to me to resolve the issue. They used a trapper that was not a professional person, who wasn't following professional practices. On March 21st, I found their address. I sent a letter to them. They seemed to be interested to help me. On April 5th, he said he was going to get a new trapper, that is on text. Didn't hear from him for 3 days. On April 8th, he wrote back again after I inquired and said, "You need to go ahead and work with Jason, the property manager." And by April 8th, I was so fed up, I hired my own trapper. They immediately went up there. Keep in mind, on March 16th, the trapper that they hired said that there was no way to access the nest area up in the attic.
So your guy, you paid him $50, he solved the problem.
Yes.
Right. How did he solve the problem? He went in there and physically took out everything that was in there.
Yes, he did. And when the other trapper would have let those animals just die because he
What was it that
excluded the
your
mother.
trapper? What was it that your trapper went up there to get? The babies?
Everything. She even went back and she placed a trap for the mother so that she could get the mother. But then the property manager sent me a notice and told me that I was working against their policy and that I had to remove the trap immediately. This is a repair, replacement, cease, desist, and notification. It's come to your attention that you have made the following unauthorized repair or replacement on the premises, unauthorized trapper vendor, traps remaining in place at the property. They literally told me to remove the trap that I paid for, that was to set the trap for the mother to be trapped.
Are these the baby raccoons right by your face?
Yes, that I was so happy and honored that they didn't have to die.
That's great, and that's
Yes.
lovely. I would never put a raccoon by my face.
Not even close.
I was
a little bit concerned.
Yep.
But, all right, Mr. Knake and Ms. Roth, let me hear from you folks. Who wants to speak first?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So the plaintiff did contact our property manager on January 25th via email, but the email went into spam. I mean, the property manager never got the email. So the tenant called the property manager a few days later on January 28th.
Right, but I'm more concerned. Let's give away those 3 days. Then from January 28th, which is the phone call, until we're well into April and the problem isn't solved. I know that it takes a bit to solve the problem, but that's a lot of months living with.
She didn't describe the.
Well, perhaps she's not as descriptive as I am, but she was complaining a lot because there's 32 emails and texts that that there's something up there and that the noise is bothering her.
Okay, I understand. The noises that you described were scratching because the ceiling above her room where these supposed black raccoons are is a vaulted ceiling. It's not a regular attic where they could run around. That's why it comes down to that it was inaccessible to get at from the attic.
How did her person do it?
Okay, so her person, our trapper is 6'4", 280 pounds.
Why would you hire a trapper who's 6'4", 280 pounds? Because that guy isn't getting in the attic. It's like a jockey. You got to hire a small, wiry, wily fellow to get in there, or woman, whoever, whatever it is. But you got to get somebody who can get in there. But 6'4", 280 pounds.
It's not going to work.
No. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so first of all, this professional trapper, has been doing this for over 20 years. This is the property managers, the trapper that they use all the time, their first go-to. At this point, he didn't, or we, or they didn't think they even had to go into the attic. There are other methods to get the mama raccoon out, and then when she finally had babies, there was other methods to get that out, and that's what he was doing.
I understand, but where do we put the fact that he was doing that for February, March, April? That's a long time to be, quote, doing it. And I understand I'm going to take 3 days out for the wrong email. I'm going to take 2 weeks out for COVID. But it's still such a long time to solve the problem. What do I do with that? I mean, she's asking for 50% rent. I know why she's asking for that. You guys decided that she was a headache and you didn't want to keep renting to her, or you decided to move back. Either way, it's your property. You get to decide that. And she's angry she didn't get to stay there. I'm not stupid. I see through that. But by the same token, I am someone who's aware that noise is annoying. And I know it annoyed her because she was constantly speaking to your property managers, sending texts, sending emails. In other words, Ms. Roth, if it were your trapper who you hired and it's 3.5 months and he hasn't solved it, at some point, don't you think you're not getting what you paid for?
We did get involved, absolutely. And she was interfering in the process.
Okay, talk to me about that.
Okay, so in his statement that the trapper gave, he talked about how she had interfered. She was road blocking. She would go down.
What's road blocking?
In his terms, that he would explain to her how he wanted to do his process, and she would say, "No, you can't do that. No, you can't do this." So we were. So I think I thought there was a lot of communication between all of them, and that they were helping. And we, warranted her a place to have habitability, but we never warranted that a wild animal wouldn't get in there. So we took immediate action.
Listen, I have no qualms with the fact that you took action. In other words, I don't think you sat around saying, "Oh, the hell with her." That didn't happen. No one's suggesting that happened. The problem is if the action isn't effective, who's that on? And if it disrupts her quiet and peaceful enjoyment of the place, then is she entitled to something? And you're right. Habitability is the standard. Wild animals can get in there. If she was like, "I want all my rent back. I'm not paying rent because there's a wild animal," I would tell her she's nuts. But that's not what she's saying. She, in my opinion, she's asking for too much, but still she wants some rent back because of a breach of the warranty of habitability, because it's maddening to have animals living in your home with you. You did not sign up for, housemates.
And then there is the feces and the urine that I had to be exposed to as well.
How were you exposed to feces and urine?
Through breathing the smell of it. They never once went up there and cleared any of that stuff out, even after they sealed the area. I took a picture of the ceiling and you could see where the paint was flaking down from there.
What do you suppose is causing the paint to flake down from the ceiling?
Well, I don't know, other than there was a lot of digging and scratching and nesting. And actually, please, when it comes to what it sounded like, it wasn't little raccoons scurrying around the attic. All of the batting from the insulation was torn away and loaded up to create a nesting area up there.
Do you have pictures of that?
I do not, but I saw it with my own eyes.
Tell me about your attempt to extend the lease. Because it was, your argument here today is it was unlivable, Judge, so I should get some money back. But we know that you tried to extend the lease to live there.
Yes.
Right. So talk to me about that.
Because there are no rentals in St. Augustine, and that was not a happy place for me.
Okay.
That entire housing development house that I lived in was not a pleasant place because of what took place there with the raccoon.
So why were you trying to extend the lease?
If there's no other rentals to be had, then what am I going to do?
So what did you end up doing?
I was very lucky. I'm a minister. And I found a bride who hired me for her wedding, and they literally gave me the house that they moved out of to rent, so that they could move into their new home. And that's how lucky I am. And you see the things that I've just moved into this house behind me that have yet to be unwrapped. I was very, very, very lucky.
Okay. So here's where we are. We have a situation. You agree with me, Mr. Knaik and Ms. Roth, that it really took a long time and it still wasn't even fixed. Do you not agree with me that that was inordinate?
It took a while, but our trapper was professional, and we have the emails saying that he was in the process of doing all this.
Yeah, but listen, has this ever happened to you? Have you ever had to trap wildlife in the house?
No, ma'am.
I have twice had to deal with this problem, and it is maddening, but it doesn't take 3 months. It doesn't. It takes a bit. It's not snap your fingers. It might take a week, 2 weeks. It depends on where they are, if they have access, if they don't have access. It depends on, whether they make sure to trap all the holes so that there's no other way for the animal to get out except for this way. It's art. There's an art and a science to it, and it takes a bit, but it doesn't take 3 months. And I don't know if the trapper just didn't like her attitude, or I know she didn't like the trapper's attitude, but I'm working on it for 3 months is ineffective. Under any ruler, it's ineffective. The question is, what is that worth? Well, certainly it's worth the $50 she had to pay her trapper to get it done. That's for darn sure. And then is there a value to the inconvenience of having to live through that for an additional several months that one should not have to live through that? I think there is. Is it 50% rent? No. It's not 50% rent. So I'm going to award her. So March, April, and May, I'm going to add $200 to her recovery, and I'm going to order the defendants to pay her $650 for the issue and the trouble. That is my verdict. Good luck, folks.
So the plaintiff prevails. I'm not sure she's going to be too happy with it. She only gets $650. She was suing for $3,300. Let's talk to the defendants first. What do you feel about the decision, ma'am? You got to give her $650 back.
No, we're compassionate with what we had to go through, and we also did have a trapper there, and there was a lot more involved than we were able to express this during this session.
But you agree with the judge that was a kind of a long time for her to have to put up with that noise, right?
Yeah, well, it wasn't put up once the raccoons were removed on April 8th. It only comes out to be about 10 weeks or whatever.
10 weeks? That's a long time.
No, I understand, but we had somebody working on it.
Let's see what Ms. Hurwitz feels about now. She prevailed, but Ms. Hurwitz, the judge says you're going to get $650. How do you feel about that?
I feel that it was very wrong for the judge to be rude.
My question is, what do you feel about the judge awarding you $650? You were suing for $3,300.
I feel disrespected. I have felt that way since the beginning of this time, and I would have thought that a woman of her caliber would have understood what I went through.
All right, you're a little upset with the judge. That's okay. You're entitled to do that. But in any event, you did prevail, and you got $650 back. All right, let's get Harvey's take on this case. Harvey, what do you think?
Doug, the plaintiff mentioned a warranty of habitability. That is implied in almost all leases. And what it means is that you have a legal right to a place that is habitable, free of safety and health concerns. In a situation like this, you could argue that both health and safety are compromised with wild animals in the attic. But bottom line is that this warranty of habitability protects tenants from danger inside the house, and it's something you can enforce even if it's not in the contract.
Which pinball games does Judge John have, and does he have a favorite?
Pinball is one of my favorite topics, okay? I'm not going to lie. I have, much to my wife's dismay, like 7 games now, don't I? I have a bunch. I've got Spider-Man, Pirates of the Caribbean, Lost in Space, South Park, Scared Stiff.
That's the newest one,
It's
right?
the newest edition. Elvira's House of Horrors, and The Adventures of Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Which is my favorite.
That's
now,
your favorite.
Scared Stiff, you came home from golfing with your brothers.
Right.
Which were, a 4-day trip.
Right.
And then you said to me, hey, will you get in a car with me and pick up, I have to swap pinball machines. I'm like, what?
Right.
Yeah, I got to go to Atlanta and swap pinball machines.
A lot of people want to trade straight up. They don't want to sell the games because they have a game, they get a little tired of it.
It's 10 hours to Atlanta.
Yeah, that's about that. Yeah,
right.